Children who grew up in abusive households, at what point did things go too far? I grew up in a remote village in Africa. My father would force us children to stay home with my mother and help with chores while he went out to make money. This changed when American missionaries came and opened a school for the local children. The village men and elders hated this because it meant all the kids would have to leave their homesteads to attend school, leaving all the chores undone for the day. On the other hand, my mother was overjoyed with the idea. She had heard stories from other women whose sons had attended school and how successful they had become later in life. My father was furious. He liked coming home to a fully clean house and hated seeing uncompleted chores. It became an uphill battle for my mother about the importance of school for me, instead of taking care of the garden and farm. They were always arguing about how this education was getting in the way of more important things, like grazing the cattle and goats. My father always went on and on about how the cows were getting thinner and producing less milk because there was no one to feed them properly. After a miserable year of coming home to the constant bickering of my parents, my father decided to put an end to it. He ordered me to bring all the books I had, as well as my uniform, to him. He wrapped them all together with the books and threw them into the fire. He then forced me to go take the bulls out to the fields just beside the school. It was a mockery. He wanted me to see the other kids in school, sitting in class, learning. He tried to convince me how useless sitting there was. I was beyond hurt. I felt that my father was holding me back from reaching my potential. I cried on the way home. Later that evening, my mother discovered what my father had done. She was incredibly upset. I had never seen my mother this angry in my entire life. For the first time in her life, she physically attacked my dad. It proved to be of no use. My father was too strong for her. She was severely beaten and kicked out. I remember seeing her face. She had a busted lip that was seeping blood. A patch of her hair had been pulled out, and there were blood-gushing cuts on her neck. A few days later, she was brought back by her parents. They instructed her to never repeat what she had done, or else she would be kicked out for good. My grandparents also threatened to abandon her if it were to happen again. Things went back to how they were before. I was back to herding livestock and plowing the farms. I was beyond depressed, watching other kids in my town get the privilege of going to school. While they were gaining knowledge, I just sat there awkwardly, dying inside with envy. That is, until one night. I had just come home when my mother called me, and by her demeanor I could tell something was off. She was sweating and shaking. She instructed me to take a bowl, fill it up with milk, and bring it to her. I did as I was told, but after handing it to her, she turned around and started vigorously shaking the bowl. I saw that she placed a drop of some sort of dark purple substance inside it. She handed it to me and asked me to take it to my father after the milk inside had settled. Being unaware of what was in the milk, I took it to him. After that, I went about my business of farming. I was alerted by a loud wail from the back of the room where I used to sleep. I ran outside, and there was my dad. He was on the ground, my mom standing right beside him, hurling curses at him. He was stiff. His eyes were yellow. He was foaming at the mouth, and he had soiled his pants. At that point, he and I knew what was going on. With his last remaining spurt of energy, he cried out in his native language, "My son, you have just killed me." He died and was buried a few days later. The next day, I went back to school. When I was leaving, my mother whispered to me, "It was for the better, my son." I took that as a sign of keeping the secret between us. Throughout my life, I've never talked about it. My mom is now old, but I still cry whenever I think about what she had to do for me to have a different life.